Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. There is thunder, and there is lightning, and poof, bam, a woman appears. Greetings, my name is Zoe. That's spelled Z-O or Z to the O for those of you outside of the U.S. Thank you for joining us for the 140th episode of Backlit Cinema, the podcast, where we take a look back at the movies of yesteryear from the latter half of the 1900s. If you like what you're about to hear, then tell your family, tell your friends, and tell those two geeks of the street about our little show. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm excited to have on the show today somebody a little bit different than what I usually have. I'm about to have for you an awards-winning film director and screenwriter. He's been out in these streets producing these films. He knows what the work is. So we talk about movies, but this man right here is actually making them. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you right here, right now, Rob Mabry.
Man, I don't know if I've ever had such an enthusiastic introduction. So, Z to the O, we call him Zoe. I appreciate that, man. Thank you very much. It's great to be here with you.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you. I'm glad to have a filmmaker on board who knows the trials and tribulations, the angst of trying to put a movie together. So in your travels, you have mentioned that you are a child of the military. You served in the military. Which branch did you serve in?
I was in the United States Army. I was a journalist.
That is awesome. And the only thing I can remember about journalism when I was in the Army was the Stars and Stripes, which they didn't make us read, but there was a time when that was the only thing to read.
Oh, yeah. It's, options are limited, especially if you were overseas. It's like, give me something I can actually read.
Right. So you actually had a love of writing before you joined the Army. So by the time you got into the Army, do you feel like you were able to hone your writing skills as a Army journalist?
It certainly helped. But like you said, I started writing at a young age. If I was in school, right, if I was given a writing assignment, like that was the thing that I was most excited about. Definitely preferred English to math. As a kid, I, was the kind of kid who was like, constantly making my own comic books, writing stories, putting on plays with my friends. And so I had, a love of writing and performing from a very young age. And then I think the experience that I had in the military as a journalist and really, kind of understanding the structure of writing and writing a new story certainly helped. And I actually was able to use my role as a journalist in the military as an outlet for my humor. So I wrote a humor column for the base newspaper. It was something that a lot of people found entertaining. In fact, the colonel who was in charge of the base, he was a big fan of it. But he had his second in command, this lieutenant colonel, who did not think I was funny, did not think that our base newspaper should have a humor column. And when the base commander, the colonel, was away and the lieutenant colonel was in charge, he hauled me into his office and just like reamed me out. I think I'd referred to troops as like scum-sucking dogs or something. And he just lit into me and tore me a new one, for half an hour in his office. It was excruciating, but yeah, had a great time in the military, and it was a lot of fun.
He sounds like a sourpuss. Now,
he was. I still remember Lieutenant Colonel Ramos.
Right,
he did not like me.
So thinking back to your recruitment, when you were recruited, did they tell you, "Oh yeah, you can join the military and be a writer"? Was it like that, or were there other options? What were they saying to you?
I was definitely getting that pitch, and it was like my parents were sick of me. I was just screwing around. I had no direction. And so they were like, look, you need to do something. And so I went and I took the ASVAB, which is the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery. But it's the test you take to see which jobs you qualify for. And I'm a pretty smart guy, so I qualified for basically any job I wanted. I also took the DLAB, which is the Defense Language Aptitude Battery. I don't know why I remember the names of all these tests, but that was to test how your aptitude for learning languages. And I scored really high. And my dad was actually a linguist. He was a Russian linguist. And so my parents were very keen for me, to follow in his footsteps and become a linguist. And, they understood you had a pretty cushy life in the military if that was your MOS. But I was like, nope, I'm going to be a journalist. And I don't really regret that, decision. But it wasn't really what they wanted me to do. But, like who listens to their parents at 18?
Right. So the interesting thing is that like being recruited and a recruiter telling you that, they know you're a writer and they say, well, you can be in the military and be a writer. Like I myself, I have a similar journey. I less writing stories, but more drawing comics, drawing comic book characters and drawing like panels of comic book action. I was in that direction because I can never really fully gather a story together. But
we would have made a good team.
Right,
yeah, because my drawing skills were horrible, but I needed somebody to create those comic book panels. So
yeah, not everybody can be John Byrne. So yeah, it's I was fully into doing that, and so with me drawing all the time and taking art classes and whatnot, when I was recruited, the recruiter was telling me, "Yeah, you could draw pictures." Did not draw a single picture. There was like it's like he tried to say that it's almost like he gave me an impression that there was like an artist MOS, but there was apparently no such thing. Not only that, but well, I took the ASVAB, and the only things I qualified for, and it's like I considered myself a pretty intelligent person at the time. Like when I was in high school, I got mostly A's and B's, and I did have a weakness in math, but pretty much everything else, like I was pretty good. But I think the first problem is like when I was recruited, I was like 21 or 22 or something like that. So I was a few years away from high school, and I was in community college, so I wasn't really taking classes that reinforce English or math. So when I took the ASVAB, I don't know how I did, but I only qualified for being infantryman, being a cook, or being a truck driver.
Oh, man. I think you might have choked on that test then.
I probably choked in the test.
Or your recruiter was just bullshitting you. He's like, oh, sir, sorry, man, we only had these 3 things.
Right, that too. Because I think it has something to do with where you're being recruited. And I think at the time I was, I don't know if I was joining the National Guard or I think I was probably joining the reserve. So there, when you join the reserves, you have limited options of what you can do. And I think that had I opted to join the regular army from the get-go, I probably would have had a wider range of options. But yeah, that was a trip.
So what did you end up finally choosing?
I became a truck driver, and I became right. I was okay at that. But it was fun. The fun thing about truck driving is that you kind of get blamed for a lot of things that's not really your fault. It's like they're looking for somebody to blame one. Like when your truck breaks down, is it your fault or was the mechanic's fault? It's like you get to play the blame game, and that's fun. And the other thing is that there's a lot of not working, or I don't want to say sitting around, but like unless you're actually driving somebody to a location, there's not a lot for a truck driver to do. So, right. So it's especially when you're in the National Guard, so it's just a lot of busy work. A lot of just let's just make stuff up. Yeah. So that's a lot of fun. So I have to ask you, you've got this movie, The Legend of El Chupacabra, that you made, and the crux of this movie is monster hunting. So would you consider yourself a monster hunter? Are you a monster enthusiast? Are you a cryptozoologist, as they say in the movie?
Honestly, no, not at all. Not at all. I I love monster movies, and definitely as a kid, like I was, really into monster movies. And I my dad was in the military, worked for the government. I spent a lot of my life on military bases. Every military base just about has a theater, and Sunday was Sunday matinee day. And so they played a lot of kids movies, and my mom would give me $1. And back in the day, $1 would get me like into the movie theater, popcorn and a soda, and so I loved going to the theater. And back at that time, at least on the base that I lived on, before the movie, they would play a little serial, which was like a 10-minute, mini movie that really in the 40s, 30s, 40s, 50s, it was popular before a showing. And so there were a lot of kind of monster themed serials that I watched as a little kid, very classic B movie, guy in a rubber suit. And so I think I wanted to capture part of that in the Legend of El Chupacabra. And so that's part of the reason that I picked that sort of, B movie, monster movie as my, first crack at a horror comedy.
Oh, that's pretty
I
awesome.
shouldn't say it's my first crack. I made a bunch of short films that were horror comedies as well. But for a feature film, I think that was part of the inspiration.
Right. So, as far as doing creature features, you've done El Chupacabra. Have you considered doing something like on Bigfoot or the Wendigo? You mentioned the Wendigo. I should say the Wendigo was mentioned in the Legend of El Chupacabra. So is there any leanings towards doing more of these humorous creature features?
I don't know about a creature feature. Like I left it open in the movie. Like, I had the post-credit sequence, and I don't know if you made it, all the way to the end to see that, but Chupacabra kind of leaves it open that maybe there could be a sequel. I have a lot of ideas, right? A lot of scripts, things that I want to do. And so I don't know when I'm going to get to that sequel, or if I would do it. We'll see. Hopefully people are clamoring, for a sequel, and it inspires me to do it. But right now, what I really want to do is take this same cast and do a similar, a horror comedy that's similar in tone, set in that same town, right? The movie takes place in a fictional Texas town called Bluffkin, Texas, which is in the hill country of Texas. And is my stand-in, I think, for like Stephen King has Derry, and well, I don't want to give away what movie we're going to talk about. I don't know if we've talked about that yet, but anyway, I would like to do a very similar type of movie with the same cast, in the same setting. But it's going to be about an alien abduction. So another, sort of genre. So this would be more of a sci-fi comedy. But movies cost money. I don't know if you knew that or not. And I haven't had much of a return yet on mine. Like, it just got out there on DVD and Blu-ray on just 2 days ago. So that was a really exciting milestone. And then in the coming weeks, it's going to hit streaming. My wife is asking me, like, have you made any money back on that movie? Not yet, sweetheart. But I feel that it's coming. So we'll see. The alien abduction movie is a very ambitious project. And so it's going to take making some money back from Chupacabra, I think, before I'll be able to do that. So I have some other ideas that are on kind of a smaller scale that I'm excited about as well. So we'll see what happens.
Right. By the way, congratulations on getting your movie out on DVD. So it's out in stores. I didn't realize that had happened just 2 days ago.
Yeah. It's, physical media is not what it used to be, but there are people who still love to have, you know, a DVD or a Blu-ray, and it's just cool to be able to have that. I've got it right here. I know you guys can't see it.
Right.
On audio, but you know, to be able to hold that in your hand, and stare at it and go, "Damn, I made that."
Right.
Feels pretty good.
Right, absolutely. You also have some merch on your website. I love the Chupacabra design as a callback to Jurassic Park. Those are
No,
fabulous.
I don't know what you're talking about. Some guy got really bent out of shape. You stole the Jurassic Park logo. I'm like,
no, that's not how that works.
Parody, dude. It's parody.
It's an homage, and homage is a fair game.
Exactly.
Yeah, I didn't actually. You also mentioned there was an after credit scene. I did not realize it was an after credit scene. When we hit the credits, I was like, "Oh, it's good." Yeah, I got to go check that out. Oh, thank you for the review code right away. That was pretty awesome. And what I really liked about your film, because I watched a number of indie projects, and what I've noticed about a lot of them, it's either poor sound or poor lighting, or it's not well acted, or sometimes it's just boring. But your film is none of that, so I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
I gotta admit,
you give me chills. That compliment just made me feel so good. Thank you.
Yeah, I gotta admit. I mean, to be totally honest, horror is not my thing. It is like it's a stretch for me to do horror comedy because I don't like to be terrified, and I don't particularly like gore. And I learned that I didn't like gore when I watched Saw 2. And so I always reference that. But what happens,
that's a pretty good barometer.
Right. But what I learned is that, it was with some trepidation when I went to watch your film. But what I really liked about it is the cast. I especially liked, I forgot his name. Let me see if I wrote it down anywhere. Sam Pierce. He looks a lot like a young Michael Cera. I'm sure that you get that a lot.
that is my go-to nerd.
Right.
Sam and I have worked, I think, in I did probably 20 short films before I made this feature.
Right.
And Sam has been in 5 or 6 of those shorts, and he always plays a kind of nerdy character. And I wrote Chupacabra for him and some of the other actors. I originally wrote it as a short film, and it was vastly different than what the feature ended up being. But I knew that I wanted to do this kind of buddy pick thing, and I've always loved 80s nerd movies. And Sam, he's just a terrific nerd character. Has that Michael Cera vibe for sure. And he's a sketch comedy actor. He's terrific. He's very much a straight man in the movie, but he's hilarious.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, it worked out pretty well. I enjoyed his role tremendously and how he played it. So my last question I wanted to ask. I'm searching through my question list because I actually see my audience. They know me. They know I don't write any gripping, insightful questions. I'm just spitballing over here. But my last question I wanted to write is, from writing, directing, editing, finding distribution, crowdfunding, promotion, what do you find is the most challenging aspect of filmmaking?
Finding the money to make the movie is definitely the biggest challenge. And we ran a crowdfunding campaign. I think we were trying to raise 20,000, and we pulled in 11,000. I funded a lot of the movie myself. And I had some people who stepped up for me, at a time, especially in post-production. It was my first feature film. I didn't really understand how much I was going to need once I got into post-production. In terms of, sound is a big expense that I just didn't quite understand. And I had some visual effects that I needed done. And I was very fortunate to work with a VFX house called Ronin Films, who did they did all the major kind of VFX work in Unreal Engine. And so I think that's another thing that kind of levels up the movie, for an indie film. It's we've got some pretty cool VFX and practical effects. But to answer your question, like the hardest thing is getting the money together to make.
Yeah, I can imagine.
After that, the days of shooting and like trying to get it done, doing it on weekends, just trying to keep the pace up to be able to finish, like that's a grind for sure.
Right. So that's pretty awesome, because I can imagine that filmmaking is a hungry beast, and it just eats cash, right? And you're very conscious about how to spend the money, how not to waste money, how to be as frugal as possible, with at the same time putting out the best product possible. And I can tell by watching the movie that you definitely put out the best product that you possibly could, and it looks fantastic. And especially the sound, because I think for a lot of people who are making their own movies, the sound is the hardest thing to get right. And the audio on your film, it's like you really made sure that was fantastic.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time on sound. We had a premiere in October, and we were a little rushed in that getting to that premiere. And so after the premiere in San Antonio, we really went back and revamped a lot of the audio. Martha Van Garza did the sound design work. She actually plays Pete's mom in the movie. She was in radio for many years as a director herself. And so she spent a lot of time on the sound design. And it's surprising when you take that audio from when you're on set and you listen to it, and it's just low, and you're like, oh my God, is this gonna work? Like, how am I gonna get this to sound like a movie? But it's really kind of amazing if you have the right people doing the work, like what you can get to. And I think the sound is really punchy. And for an indie film, it sounds pretty damn good.
Yes. Thank you for that.
Yeah, that's you can watch something that you can barely see. Like if your internet is not great and you're watching a movie, like you could tolerate bad visuals for a long time if you can hear and understand everything.
Right.
But if it's the other way around and you have the most beautiful picture in the world, but you can't understand what people are saying, you'll be out in 20 seconds. So,
absolutely.
You got to have great sound.
Absolutely. Also, well, let me one more thing. I know that was the last question, but I just
so I'll talk about my movie all day long, man.
I wanted to switch gears real quick, because you talked a lot about some of your the shorts that you've done. One of the shorts I was able to find on YouTube, you still have your, what's it called? Something Productions, your eyeball. Bright Eye Productions. Yeah, sorry. I didn't write that down. And that's why it slipped my mind. I need to learn to write everything down or it'll vanish. Anyway, so Bright Eye Productions, I was able to find that. And you wrote a short called She's Gone. And I got to say, it's not funny. No,
it's not.
Yeah. Especially when you've gone through something like that. But that was the only comment I make about that short, is that it could have used a little punch. Could have used some punch up. Or maybe not. Maybe that's not what the director was going for. All right. Why don't you tell the audience about the film before we do that, I'm sorry. I meant to get you to plug your stuff. So you directed and produced a film called The Legend of El Chupacabra. Are there any more plugs that you wanted to present to our audience, where they could find you, your social media, anything like that?
Yeah, so The Legend of El Chupacabra is a horror comedy. It's about a couple of nerds who have an encounter with the chupacabra at a young age in this little town called Bluffkin where they live. And there seems to be a cycle where it comes back every 4 years. And the main character, Pete, is obsessed with it. And when people start disappearing in the town, he puts his band of friends back together to go and hunt down the chupacabra and save the town. So it is very much an R-rated comedy. It's little raunchy, little cringy at moments. That's all very intentional, and comes from my youth and the '80s films that I love. So there's a lot of that in there. So if you are interested in horror comedies like that genre, you can find The Legend of El Chupacabra on Amazon or Walmart in the DVD and Blu-ray format at this time. And keep an eye out for it. It'll be on a ton of streaming platforms here coming over the next couple of weeks. And if you want to follow us on social media, and I would humbly ask that you do, that always helps with the promotion of the film. We are at the Chupacabra Movie on Facebook and Instagram.
Awesome. Also, you have elchupacabra.com. That's still up, isn't it?
Chupacabramovie.com.
Oh, chupacabramovie.com. Okay.
Thank you.
I'll make sure all the links will be in the show notes. I didn't want to talk specifically about the movie because there are a lot of, I don't want to spoil anything because there are a lot of funny parts. Like, you tell a funny joke that you saw in the movie. It's not going to be funny by the time people actually watch the movie. But I just want to point out there were a lot of points in the movie there that were really funny, some really hilarious jokes. And I definitely appreciate that. You promised comedy. There was some comedy in the movie. I laughed out loud at some of these things that happened. And, I just want to say Thank you for that. So,
thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Oh, let's we're going to switch over to our next segment, and that segment will be the opening credits.
So have you announced the title of the film already? I'm trying to remember. Is that my job?
I'm asking you to tell the audience, right. Rob, what movie did we watch?
Ladies and gentlemen, we watched the 1985 classic Weird Science.
All right.
So, Weird Science is a film about a couple of nerds, Gary and Wyatt. They're high schoolers who have bonded over their low self-esteem. And, like any two nerds in a high school comedy, they're looking to climb that social ladder, but their efforts are frustrated because they can't seem to get out of their own way. And then they have this brilliant idea of using their computer technology to create for themselves someone who will show them the way, someone with whom they can explore their sexuality and break out of their shells. And in an unbelievable act, never before or since, they create out of pure data and a girl's toy doll a 5'8", trim, beautiful, flesh and blood woman.
That's a fantastic premise. This movie was released August 2nd, 1985, produced by Universal Pictures all by themselves. It grossed over $23 million in the US and Canada and $38 million or over $38 million worldwide on a reported budget of $7.5 million. They did the thing. If you adjust that for inflation,
they made the bucks.
Yeah, they made the money. If you adjust that for inflation, that is if they made $66 million in US and Canada, or if they made $110 million worldwide, and if the budget was $21 million. So they did extremely well. They made their money back. It garnered basically it's kind of like a successful film that has garnered a cult following. I think that it's safe to say that.
Yeah, agreed. John Hughes was just knocking it out of the park, from 1984 to 1986. I think he had, basically two movies a year. So he's a very prolific guy. And they were all hits. So, I don't know how this compares with some of the other films that he has, but came in with a pretty tight budget and then made a boatload of money. So
yeah,
good job.
Not only that, but I don't really think he cared about this movie. Not that he didn't put forth effort to make it a good movie, but this wasn't one of the ones that he was really passionate about. And I think I put it on in the trivia later on when we talk about it. But he was working on another movie that he really cared about, and this one was just something that he had to get out of the way so he could work on something that he really wanted to do, like where he felt that he was put on this earth to do this other movie, and this movie was just the price he had to pay in order to get to the other project that he really wanted to do. So to that end,
that's good. The studio kind of held his feet to the fire and was like, "Hey, man, you gotta wrap up this weird science."
Right.
And then it was the Breakfast Club, right? The other movie that he was working on.
That was his passion
I can
project.
understand why he was just like, "Oh God, I got to get back and get this." Breakfast Club
Right. So, start us off. Tell us who was starring in the movie.
Oh yeah, for sure. So. Kelly LeBrock plays the girl that they create, Lisa. She was in Hard to Kill, The Woman in Red, and then wrongfully accused, which was Leslie Nielsen vehicle. So one of his very kind of goofy comedies.
Yeah, she was super hot for like a very short period of time. It's not like she.
Ouch.
Yeah, I know. It's not like she stopped.
Wait. Do you mean super hot, like popular? Or
yeah, popular. Not like she's always pretty. She's still pretty to this day. Like everyone. Yeah. I didn't mean her looks. I meant as far as her popularity and being in movies. It's like she would just be in a lot of movies for a short period of time, and then kind of like you. It's like she would take these long breaks. She doesn't have a huge filmography. She's not in a lot of movies, but she is steadily making like either TV shows or movies or some type of appearance. So it's like every once in a while she dips her toe in the acting pool and you say, oh, you're like, oh, there's Kelly LeBrock. So, the next person is Anthony Michael Hall. He plays Gary Wallace. You've probably seen him in War Machine, Foxcatcher, or The Dark Knight. And one of not the most successful actor, but one of the most successful actors that this film has produced. He's actually, he was kind of on a rise during this period. Like he never really fell off. Like he was the go-to guy for the director John Hughes. He's been in a few John Hughes movies, and even from there, his roles continued to expand, and he continued to act, and never really stopped. You've either seen him on TV shows or you've seen him in movies. He's had at least one hit TV show that everybody still talks about. So yeah, he's done well for himself, I must say.
Yeah, Anthony Michael Hall was like my doppelganger when I was a kid. He's the same age as me, and I looked like him when I was young. He was in the movie Vacation, which is probably the first film that people would recognize him from as Rusty. My dad used to call me Rusty. I actually had the exact same shirt that he wore for half of the movie Vacation, which was a film that John Hughes wrote, didn't direct it, but that was where they, kind of made their initial connection. And then Anthony Michael Hall was in 16 Candles, which is a great John Hughes film, and then The Breakfast Club and Weird Science. So, they had a pretty deep connection. I actually saw a recent Comic-Con event where Anthony Michael Hall was talking about being, John Hughes' essentially third kid. Like he stayed in his house all the time. So they were very close.
Yeah. Another thing I noticed about it, I just did a watch of The Breakfast Club for the first time on another podcast. And the funny thing about it is that you notice that he's usually the tallest person in the room. I think he's like 6'1", and he's remarkably for such a young kid to be that tall.
Yeah, yeah, and he feels, he feels like a small, nerdy kid in the movies, especially in 16 Candles. But you're right, he's not a short guy.
Right, right. So who's up next?
I'm going to struggle here with the first name. I believe it's Elon Mitchell Smith. He plays Wyatt Donnelly, the other, part of the nerdy duo. He was in the film Daniel. He was in The Chocolate War and The Wildlife. And he doesn't seem to have really pursued acting as a major part of his career. I know that he's very into geek culture. I think he's got his own podcast, and he was really into the Dungeons and Dragons scene. So it's kind of funny that he's playing part of this nerdy duo and may actually be nerdier than the character that he was playing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, not a thick IMDb biography, but he does every once in a while stick his toe into the acting pool like Kelly LeBrock does. But
yeah, it seems like he, kind of, if he finds something that he thinks might be fun, then he's probably going to go into it, but he's not out there,
right.
To find acting gigs.
But someone who is taking a deep dive into the acting pool is somebody who's like been underwater and just swimming and just living his best life as an actor is Bill Paxton. He plays Chet Donnelly, and among his many films, you may have seen him in Frailty, Twister, or Vertical Limit. And he's an actor that I enjoy seeing. The last time I actually seen him in a role was in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and he was comical in that role. And I was surprised to see him. It's like, oh, he's in a TV show. That's totally awesome.
Yeah, unfortunately, he passed away, I think, in 2017. He was in Big Love, which was a great, I think that was Showtime show, but the show about polygamy. He was terrific in that. One of my favorite films that he was in was called A Simple Plan with Billy Bob Thornton. That's a great film. And then he was also had a small role in Aliens. And I think the flat top that he had in Weird Science might have contributed to him getting cast in Aliens as a space marine in James Cameron's film. So yeah, love Bill Paxton.
Yeah, he really rocks that flat top.
Oh man, I heard that he actually did that himself. Like, nobody told him to put the cut it as a flat top. He just decided that he was going to do it, and he was really hoping that John Hughes would be cool with it, and clearly he was. But yeah, the flat top just makes the character.
Yeah, that he understood the character, and I like that. If he really did do it on his own and showed up to set like that, I think that's fantastic. It's like he understood exactly the type of person.
That's an actor's commitment, right?
Right. He understood the type of person that Chet was, and as Chet, it's like I remember when I watched this film when I was a kid, I was like, I hated Chet too.
Oh man, everybody hated Chet.
Right. So who's the next person?
So next we've got Suzanne Snyder. She played Deb. She was in Killer Clowns from Outer Space, Return of the Living Dead 2, and Remo Williams, The Adventure Begins. A pretty small part, if I remember correctly. I think she was playing the piano when there was this cosmic event that occurred when Gary and Wyatt were trying to make a second girl. And she got her clothes sucked off and then spit out through the chimney. Pretty sure that was.
That was Deb. I thought Deb was one of the girls that they liked.
Oh, is that the case?
Yeah, I think so.
My bad then. I don't know. Maybe I was fixated on the girl whose clothes got ripped off.
Right, because all of her clothes got ripped off, so it's kind of hard to pay attention to anybody else.
Exactly.
But
All
yeah,
right.
I
Well,
think
my apologies on
no,
that.
that's fine. That's fine. It's cool. She's all right. I'm pretty sure she's fine.
Yeah.
Up next is Judy Arelson. She played Hilly, and she's been in Friday the 13th, the final chapter, American Ninja, and Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. And I think
Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. That's a great movie.
I remember that movie. I think I feel like I need to watch it again because the first time I watched it, it wasn't what I expected, and I was bothered by it because there's a comic book series or one shot called Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, and I thought that was what I was going to see. And so when I saw the movie, I was like, "This isn't anything like the comic," and then I realized it's something completely different. That's why it's not anything like the comic. But she played the other girlfriend. She played the girl that Wyatt liked.
Yeah, I gotcha. Yeah, next up, an actor. I don't know. He kind of faded off the map, but there was this kid, Robert Downey Jr., who played the role of Ian. He was in a movie called Iron Man, and then also Bowfinger and U.S. Marshals. And
Yeah.
kidding, of course. We all know who Robert Downey Jr. is, but this is one of his very earliest films. He, I think he showed his talent, even in the small role that he had. He plays one of the nemesis along with the gentleman that you're going to introduce.
Right. So I don't know any of these movies, Bowfinger, U.S. Marshals, but I did cover U.S. Marshals at episode 43. So I guess you guys can go check that out whenever you get the chance. But of course, I am also kidding. Robert Downey Jr. has been acting for a long time, got into a little bit of trouble, pulled himself up out of the hole he created for himself. And so a fantastic redemption story for that young actor. So up next, as you alluded to, we have Robert Ruster. He played Max, the other a-hole in the movie, and he was in A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. Probably got what he deserved, probably for the things that he committed in Weird Science. He was also in Thrashing and The Debt Collector. And for real, don't know anything about any of these three movies that I just read.
I was going to say, I don't think I've seen it. I probably saw Nightmare on Elm Street 2 and probably forgot everything I knew about it the moment I walked out of the theater.
Same. I definitely watched A Nightmare on Elm Street 2. Could not tell you a thing about it. I only know about Thrashing because it used to be advertised in comics a lot. Like you turn the comic pages and you see an advertisement for Thrashing. And I think I've seen a movie poster on The Debt Collector. I couldn't tell you. So the last guy that you're about to read, I had to include him when we talked about the cast because of the role he played.
Yeah, so that's Vernon Wells. He plays Lord General. You would recognize him from Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior. And he is essentially playing the same character. I don't even know if he changed his makeup from Mad Max, as his character, Lord General in Weird Science. He's the same guy.
Yeah, he's definitely playing the same guy. I think that his makeup is different because I think in Mad Max, he played Wes, and I think that he had a mohawk in Mad Max 2. I can't remember exactly, but I just seen it recently and I'm getting images of what Vernon Wells with a mohawk. But I forgot to put this down also, was that he was in Commando and he played I can't remember his name. I can't remember his name as Commando, but he was the main bad guy in Commando. But
nice.
If my audience members, you guys listening, want to check out what our thoughts were on Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior, you can check it out on episode 130. So, Rob, why don't you tell us about the director?
All right. Yeah, this film was directed by someone who was a big inspiration for me in terms of my writing and directing career. That is John Hughes, who unfortunately is no longer with us. But he, for a period of time in the 80s, produced some of the funniest comedies ever made. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, The Breakfast Club, Uncle Buck, 16 Candles, and Ferris Bueller's Day Off, to name a few, which are that whole list, some of my favorite movies of all time.
Yeah, the thing about John Hughes is that he was so profound and so impactful when it comes to directing a specific type of movie, especially when you're talking about a teenage drama or a teenage comedy. Now, when somebody comes up with a new teenage either drama or comedy, they'll refer to it as a John Hughes movie, or they'll say they did it in a John Hughes style. And I forgot what it was. It was a movie that I had recently watched. It was kind of like a sci-fi movie or something. And that was the description that they gave it. It's like, oh, that's like a John Hughes movie. And I hadn't thought about it in those terms before. I was like, yeah, I guess you could say that this was like a John Hughes movie.
Yeah, I mean, he basically invented the teen comedy, right? Just really, really had insight, into how the minds of teenagers operate. They say that he, was very much almost a teenager himself, just in terms of his enthusiasm for life, and enjoying hijinks and being a little bit immature, which that's true of me as well. So maybe that's a connection as well. But just a brilliant writer, and produced some amazing comedy.
Yeah. The other thing that's interesting about him is that he tended to write from, at least with his teen movies, he tended to write from the point of view of the underdog, or the guys that were picked on, the guys that were bullied, the nerds. Even Ferris Bueller doesn't strike me as somebody who's like, you would look at him as like, oh yeah, that's a cool guy, but he's not the jock, he's not the what do you call it, he's not like the character on The Breakfast Club that Judd Nelson plays. He's not like that guy, right? He's just Ferris Bueller is just a cool guy who just gets away with stuff. Almost a nerd in that way. But I think his ability to write characters from a certain point of view, I think that endears him to a lot of people, him and his stories.
Yeah, I think his teenage years, really kind of informs his characters. And you're absolutely right. A lot of his movies are about the underdog, and we're rooting for them, and there's always this sort of friend group of dorks. In 16 Candles, it was kind of four of them, I think, nerdy little group of friends who just couldn't get a win, but a common theme in John Hughes films.
Right. So up next we have The Writers. This movie, as most of John Hughes movies, was written by John Hughes. And also uncredited is Al Fieldstein and William M. Gaines. And there's a reason that they're uncredited. So Hughes, he basically wrote this movie. He also wrote National Lampoon's The European Vacation, Pretty in Pink, Dutch, and Beethoven. And there are a lot of National Lampoon's movies. I don't know, how many did he write? Do you know? I didn't study his filmography. I just kind of picked and chose.
How many movies did John Hughes write?
No, how many National Lampoon movies did he write? Did he write just the one, or did he write all of them?
I think it's 5. So it's Vacation, then European Vacation, Vegas Vacation, Christmas Vacation. Man, I feel like I'm forgetting one. But there's a remake of Vacation,
right?
But all right, those are the 4 that I can think of right now.
Right.
Which in my house, like European Vacation, we don't really watch that. Vegas Vacation is funny, but Vacation is probably watched at least once a year, and then Christmas Vacation every Christmas. That's one of the movies that we sit down and watch as a family.
Yeah, I need to dig into those, because the only one that I've seen is European Vacation. The reason
you picked the wrong one, dude.
Right. The reason I mention that is because the reason that he that's one of his movies. The reason he wrote National Lampoon's A European Vacation, and I guess the other National Lampoon movies, is because he used to be a writer for the National Lampoon. His journey is similar to yours, where he was a journalist and then kind of went off to do some creative writing. So, and then from there wrote scripts for movies and then became a director. So you're on the same path.
Yeah. I hope I can achieve the same level of success.
Right.
I'm a little behind right now, but
yeah, it's sometimes it's always that way. So the film is titled after the anthology comic book series published in the 1950s by the legendary William M. Gaines and his company EC Comics, which also published Tales from the Crypt and Mad Magazine. The plot of the film is loosely based on the story Made of the Future by Al Fieldstein from the 5th issue. Producer Joel Silver had acquired all EC film rights in the early 1980s. EC stands for Educational Comics. I think that's irony. I'm going to call that irony. It's irony that EC stands for, because I think that's one of the comics that had a lot of horror titles. I'm pretty sure. That's why, because they had Tales from the Crypt.
I'm feeling like whatever connection there is between the movie Weird Science and this comic book is probably pretty tenuous.
Yeah, it's slim at best, but they got the title, and that's one of the reasons why you have the two authors that should be credited but are not. So tell us about the music.
Yeah, so the score was written by Ira Newborn, who did the score for a number of comedies. And I think scoring a comedy can be really challenging, but he did The Naked Gun 2.5, Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, The Blues Brothers, Eddie Murphy, and Nick Nolte's 48 Hours. But you know, when I think about John Hughes movies and the music, it's really the soundtrack that I think, you know, is the important part of the music in the film. You know, he's known for really, really caring about the music that goes into the film. And of course, you have the title theme, Weird Science, written by Danny Elfman when he was with his band Oingo Boingo, which was really kind of his first foray into writing music for film. And of course, like later on, he went on to write the Simpsons theme, and he worked with Tim Burton on a bunch of movies. And like, you know, everybody kind of knows that Danny Elfman score. So you know, that was an important part of the film, and you know, a very iconic song. But there's some other great music in it. I think Pretty Woman is a song, Van Halen's song, that plays when Kelly LeBrock is coming down the escalator, and Robert Downey Jr. and Robert Ruster's character spot her. There's a great Killing Joke song, 80s, in the movie. And so lots of great stuff. Like, I don't think it's the best John Hughes film soundtrack, but you know, he really cares about music, and there's a lot of good stuff in the soundtrack.
What's interesting is that as far as Weird Science is concerned, it was a song that you could tell was specifically made for the movie, because the title of the song is Weird Science, and the lyrics of the song reference what happens or a specific event in the movie. So I'm always hesitant to say, like, if there's a certain aspect of filmmaking that some people say, well, they don't do that in the movies anymore. And I'm hesitant to say that, because I'll always find examples of that sort of thing happening. It may not be happening as prolific as it used to, but some of these things still happen. But one of the things that I can say that doesn't really happen in the movies anymore is songwriters writing music specifically for the film, not something that they wrote and, you know, when the music department liked it, so they bought the rights to it to play in the film. I'm talking about hiring a band or a singer to specifically write a song for the film and then performing that song. So
Yeah, yeah.
That doesn't seem to happen as
James
much
Bond
anymore.
movies. That's probably the only
Yeah.
time it happens anymore.
Yeah, that's the only time it happens anymore. And that's only something that they play in the very beginning. You don't really, I don't know, I don't feel like you actually hear the song after the opening credits.
Right.
It's
Well, apparently Danny Elfman did not like the song "Weird Science." Like he kind of trashed it, said it was a piece of garbage, and maybe because he was doing it, just for the film, and didn't have complete creative control. Perhaps that's why I felt the way. But like, I think it's a great tune, and I think it stands up today, and it's really recognizable, and yeah, I like Weird Science.
yeah, it's a fun song to listen to. I mean, I don't know if I'm going to listen to the song outside of watching the movie, but it really enhances the movie when you watch the movie. It feels right. Like it feels like it belongs there. And
Yes.
I don't know. I don't want to tell him how to feel as an artist, but I know it makes me feel good when I hear it when I watch the movie.
I am with you. Yeah, it's got a perfect vibe for the film.
Right, right. So that's it for the opening credits. As for announcements, I'm going to pretend like I can pronounce words now.
I'll go along.
As for announcements, that's all I don't really have a whole bunch of stuff to throw out there, but if everything goes to plan, I should be making a guest appearance on Movies Lovers Unite podcast with John DiGregorio, and we're going to talk about Days of Thunder. Oh no, I would have done it. I would have done it already by the time this podcast is out. So that's great. And we'll see if that happened. If you're listening to this podcast and it has happened, then you can go back to the Movies Lovers Unite, find them on a podcast or YouTube, and see if I'm on there. See if I did it.
I feel like I'm in a time travel movie. Right?
Yeah.
Did it happen? Did it not happen? It could have happened if I was there. It would have happened if it could have.
Right, absolutely. We're doing a Back to the Future.
Yeah, but we don't know if it did or not.
Right.
All I could say is stay tuned.
Right, stay tuned. That is exactly right. So we're gonna move on to our next segment, and that segment, I say I'm pushing buttons over here, and now I'm confused. I don't know if I'm about to push the right button or the wrong button. Let's find out. Okay, that was the correct button. That's the sound that let us know that we're about to talk about our top 5 favorite parts. So why don't you start us off, Rob? What's one of your favorite parts? We'll go back and forth, but what's one of your favorite parts of Weird Science?
Yeah, so one of the things that struck me as I rewatched the movie is just how great Bill Paxton is, and the character of Chet really stands out for me. I think we've all dealt with that sort of asshole big brother in our lives, and he's just a classic jerk, and I think you can tell just from his performance that he's an actor who was going to stick and have a career. He's got some great lines. One of them that stood out to me, well, he calls them buttwads, which is just great stuff, and that's John Hughes, it comes from his mind, but Bill Paxton really, makes it work. Dickweed, I don't know if it's the first time that we have heard, dickweed as an insult, but I think it's a pretty fairly early usage of that term. So love that. And then he's got a line, you two donkey dicks couldn't get laid in the morgue, which I just love. And it's funny because Chet appears early in the movie, and then like through the whole second act, he is not in it. He only comes back towards the end, but just the couple of brief scenes he has early in the film, sets him up as this villainous character, and all throughout the second act, they're completely concerned about what Chet is going to think about the hijinks that they're getting into. So yeah, loved Bill Paxton's performance. That was one of my favorite things about the film.
Yeah, same. I'm thinking particularly because one of the first things that I wrote down is when you had his little brother kind of walking around the house. This is after they created their fantasy woman, and somehow he's walking around the house in her panties. So
yeah, he's wearing Kelly LeBrock's underwear.
right. And they
crop top.
Right, and they fit pretty snug. And when when Chet finally notices it, he's like berating him and whatnot. And Brett is in a towel. Like he just came out of the shower and the only thing that's covering him up is the towel. And then he's so grossed and offended by what his little brother's wearing. He's like, will you cover yourself? And he takes the towel off of himself and gives it to his little brother so his little brother can cover up the fact that he's wearing woman's underwear while Chet himself is totally naked. So that
we get a pretty good shot there of Bill Paxton's backside.
Right. So that's really funny. That's crazy, actually.
Yeah, that was good stuff.
So what's your next part?
So there is a scene in the film where Kelly LeBrock's character, Lisa, goes with Gary to meet his parents. I refer to this as the chips, dips, chains, and whips scene. So she goes, she's smoking, she's making herself a drink as his, very conservative parents are sitting there taking it all in. And she explains to them that they're going to a party and there's going to be sex, drugs, and rock and roll, chips, dips, chains, and whips, your basic high school orgy kind of thing. I mean, we're not talking candle wax on the nipples or witchcraft or anything like that, which, they're absolutely mortified. Me and my friends memorized that whole, speech. It was something that we would, repeat to make each other laugh. And the parents, Gary is just shrinking into the couch as she's, explaining all of the bizarre things that they're doing and plan to do. And his parents, his mom is about to have a heart attack. It's just a great comedic scene.
Yeah, it is funny. I don't know. I don't think you have to be a particularly conservative parent to not want your child to go to a sex party, right?
It's just a little soiree.
Yeah, just a little soiree. But I like it's like an unexpected confrontation,
typical high school orgy kind of stuff.
Right. Because what happens is that normally when you try to sneak off to the party, you tell whatever lie your parent needs to hear in order to get you to go to that party, or you sneak out so that they never know that you left. That's how normally a teenager
there's
would handle
absolutely
that.
No reason for her to go over there.
Right.
Meet his parents.
Right, but she's exactly the opposite. Is totally unexpected, where she just tells them point blank what she intends for this party, and basically gets them all riled up, and then puts a spell on them to make them forget. One
erases their memory.
Right. The father's totally forgotten that he even has a son. And his mom
Gary who?
Right. And his mom is like, she knows that she has a son, but she doesn't remember the party, right? So she spends the whole time trying to convince her husband that they both have a son named Gary. So yeah, that was fantastic. And also it kind of points to how there's a conversation about whether or not this film could be made today, probably, but there's a kind of an ick factor with teenagers having sexual experiences with an adult female. That would be kind of hard to I think there would be some writing adjustments. And the main thing that I think about are all the headlines of teachers taking advantages of their students.
That's what I was going to say. These damn teachers who can't stop having sex with their students have ruined it for everybody.
Yeah, they ruined it for everybody, because the thing about it is this is more of a teenage fantasy. Like teenage boys fantasize of being with older women. They pretend to be older so that it could be with older women. Like that's the whole, like when you're with your boys, that's what you talk about. That's what made this movie so incredible. But then as time goes on and you hear about these things that happen in real life, these news articles of these teachers, it's like, oh, now it don't feel so good. So I feel like probably make Lisa a girl of the same age so that it's to lessen the creep factor.
I guess, but it just wouldn't work.
No, it's not. It wouldn't be the same. I agree. It would not be the same. But there's like they would have to make someone, or if they made her a woman, they would not have them. They probably wouldn't have her making out with any of the boys. They probably wouldn't do that.
That's the way that they would go.
Right. They would have to suffer. They would definitely end up softening it up a little bit.
Sorry, like that's not all throughout the movie.
Right.
Just like in the first act, right? She kind of she showers with them for one thing, although they're clothed.
Right.
But she's naked. Like, okay, boys, here's a naked body. Right. Let's get comfortable with this. She kisses Wyatt in a way that's pretty seductive, and it introduces him to that physical contact. But that's pretty much it, right? And then she just sort of becomes a mentor, to them. So
right. It's almost an exploration of sexual mentorship and breaking out of your shell, like being comfortable,
growing a pair.
Right. Being comfortable with your peers, like being comfortable, like being yourself with your friends instead of like being afraid to talk to people. So that was part of what she was trying to do. She just had a very racy way of doing it.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah. It was definitely fun to watch it as a movie, as long as you remember that this is a fictional narrative, and as a woman, she's not real. She's a computer program, so it's all right, I guess.
yeah, sure, of course it is.
So up next is that I have for one of my favorite parts. Okay, so they're in the mall, and this is what Wyatt says. Wyatt says, "For the first time in my life, I don't feel like a total dick." And that's when Max and Robert Downey's Jr. character, Ian, they pour a slushie on top of the both of them. Now, from a small cup, it doesn't look like it would cause that much of a splash. Like, it seemed like that was
it's like two gallons of slushie.
Right. It looked like a double dare's worth of milk-like substance that was being poured on them. But yeah, that was a funny part. I really enjoyed that. That was I felt like there were times in my life when I felt that way. It was like, oh wow, I don't feel like a total dick, but I didn't get splashed on. So I think that's why that resonates with me.
Yeah, it did for me too. Like we've all, at one point or another suffered complete humiliation. But in that case, they kind of go with the flow, right? Like they don't jump up and run away or anything. They just kind of chill. Anthony Michael Hall just flips his hair back, and throws the slushie all over the place. But yeah, we're seeing them as characters, right? Just start to not stand up for themselves at that point, right? But just not let these guys get to them.
Right. So you got another part?
Yeah. Well, Kelly LeBrock, talk a bit about being at the height of your sensual powers. It's really a great performance from her, and the British accent just makes it for me. I remember, being madly in love with her when I was a kid, and I think that her performance throughout the film as this, mentor character, she really kind of transcends, her beauty, right, and is an interesting character in her own right, and so yeah, I really enjoyed her performance in that film. I don't really remember, much of anything, from she was in the Lady in Red and wrongfully accused, but this was just kind of the peak of her powers in this movie.
Yeah, I totally agree. She was definitely fantastic. She was definitely swimming in most of our heads when we thought of a beautiful woman. She was definitely one of the ones that we were thinking about.
When that door explodes and she's in the door, and then she says, "What would you two little maniacs like to do first?" That's a great line.
Yeah, absolutely. So, another part that I liked, I'm going to go back to the part that you mentioned. You mentioned the entire scene of when Lisa showed up at Gary's parents' house to negotiate bringing him to the party.
Yeah.
So I like this one line when she was talking to him, and she talking about Gary tossing off because like he shouldn't have to toss off in the bathroom, and Gary was like, "I've never tossed off." It's like so funny, and it's like not knowing what. I don't think I would have known what that was when I watched it the first time, but watching it now, I know exactly what she was talking about, even though I've never heard that term before. Like I've never heard that slang or that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I've never heard that, but I know exactly what she was talking about, and it's so funny.
Well, I'm pretty sure they were making a hand gesture too, so it wasn't too hard.
Right. It was cluing you in, but that was so funny.
I've never tossed off, Mom.
Who does that? Who does that in front of your parents? Like that's exactly what I mean. When she does the total opposite of what you expect. Like she tells them everything about Gary, right? She does not hold back.
Yeah. Well, John Hughes didn't hold back there, and I don't know if this was like a PG-13 or an R-rated, comedy. It was a little racy, for its time, but he's willing to just go for it, right?
Yeah.
Like, go all the way. And that's when comedy works. Like if you're pulling your punches, and there's some interesting, like on a rewatch, there's a scene where they go into this blues club, right? And it's nothing but black guys, and then these two stupid little white kids, and then Anthony Michael Hall is, I think he was actually imitating a Richard Pryor, like the actor Anthony Michael Hall was imitating a Richard Pryor character called Mudbone, right? But so he's trying to do this black voice, and like in the movie he's getting away with it, but I'm thinking, you know what? In 2024, you're not getting away with that. It's just not going to work, but
you couldn't get away with that in 1985. Like, I didn't realize it was like it would be as cringy as all get out. Let's put it that way. To go for somebody to go into a black club and start talking that way.
Was one scene that I was like, "Ooh, that didn't hold up."
Right. That was definitely a lot more racy. Now I think that like when you're younger and you watch that, you're not catching all of the like maybe the social consequences of acting that way.
Yeah. Well, I remember, like when I was a kid, I was a huge Eddie Murphy fan, and Eddie Murphy was on Saturday Night Live, and like he's doing buckwheat, and like I'm impersonating Eddie Murphy doing buckwheat, and it's just like today. No, that's not going to fly.
Right. It's not going to be, at least, especially not as a grown up, right? that would unless you need to be one of the greatest comedians alive in order to pull it off.
For sure.
So there's another scene that I like. It's so this is near the end of the movie, and this is when Wyatt and Gary, they decide that they're going to hook up Max and Ian. So they tell Max and Ian the secret of Lisa because they don't want to give Lisa to them because Lisa would do anything they say. It's like, no, we can't give her to her, but we'll tell you a secret. So they decide to try to make Ian and Max a girl of their very own. But it all goes horribly wrong. And instead of getting a girl, they get a missile. But before the missiles show up, Lisa knows there's something wrong. She's like downstairs with the kids, and then she realizes something is wrong. She goes upstairs. She goes outside first and notices the sky's turned all red. Then she goes up to where their room is, And then this is after the experiment is, all of the wind and all this stuff, the stuff flew out the chimney and just utter chaos happens around the house. So she says something like, you little maniacs want like power and I guess popularity so hard that you went and you tried to make a girl, but you forgot one thing. And then Wyatt was like, we forgot to hook up the doll.
yeah, which was apparently a really, really important component of the whole process.
Yeah, it's probably the most important things. And she's like, yeah, you forgot to hook up the doll. And that's when you see that the electrodes that they use, that they suppose they attach a doll to, was actually, it looks like it's attached to a picture of a nuclear missile. And the crazy thing about it is not even a 3D object. It's just a picture of a missile. And the picture, and the missiles come through the foundation of the house, and the tip of the missiles is coming through the floor of their room. So, and I think it's a couple of missiles. It's not just one missile. So that I think that when I think about this movie, that's the memory that comes up.
Like, great movies have great set pieces, like just these sequences that are really memorable. And that's one of them for sure. The whole thing, it's just like pandemonium and chaos. There's pianos shooting out of the chimney. The party is completely out of control. And then this nuclear weapon, just starts coming out of the floor of the house. And it's massive. That was one of the things that, the actors were asked, like, what was one of the, scariest, things that happened on set. And apparently that scene, because they're standing right next to this missile that's coming out of the floor. And, apparently the whole room was on hydraulics and it was shaking, and like they were actually scared, as actors. But that whole sequence with the missile, and just the whole house like being completely destroyed. It kind of reminds me of the Cat in the Hat, when the cat comes in and just completely trashes the house, and the parents are coming home, and it's like, how the hell are we gonna deal with this? It was wild.
Right. And the thing about that particular moment when Wyatt realizes his mistake, I feel like we've all had moments like that where we forget the most important component. Like, I forgot to hook up the doll, or I forgot to press record, or I forgot to add the sugar, right?
Yeah.
I forgot to put gas in the tank. So
we've all been there.
Yeah, we've all been there. That moment of realization, and he said it like he was answering the question on the game show. So yeah, that is super memorable. What's the last thing that you want to put out there as one of your favorite moments?
There's a lot of great sight gags when the grandparents show up at the house in the middle of the party, and Lisa just freezes them and sticks them in the pantry. And then later on, Chet opens up the pantry door and says, "Hi Nana, hi Pop Pop." Like he doesn't realize at first. Then he's like, "What the hell's going on?" There are lots of little moments like that throughout the movie that I think are terrific. And when Chet gets turned into, this sort of Jabba the Hutt blob thing, which Lisa does because she's trying to convince him that he needs to be nice to his brother Wyatt. That. I don't know if that effect, that I like the practical effects, and it still holds up pretty well. It's not perfect, but just a funny scene and goofy, over the top. So I enjoyed that part as well.
Yeah, that I would share that particular part where Chet is a blob. And the funny thing about it, I think when I first watched the movie, I was somehow convinced, like through conversations with my friend, that Chet had been turned to a giant piece of shit. And so I kind of thought that's what, on this rewatch, I realized, okay, maybe he's not a piece of shit. Maybe he's just like a giant homage to Jabba the Hutt. I think that's what they were going for.
That's where I think the inspiration comes from.
But he was brown and he was kind of pyramid shaped, like a doggy do. And he was but he also had eyes and teeth and he had limbs. So I think it's maybe a cross between
Jabba. He had the flat top.
Yeah, he still had the flat top. Maybe a cross between a piece of doo-doo and Jabba the Hutt. Maybe they were going for that, but that was a problem.
One way or the other, he looked like shit.
Yeah, he definitely looked like shit. So, and the thing is that you're mentioning practical effects, and I know that there are a lot of people now, they're complaining about digital effects. So like, and then you'll hear directors like, "Oh my God, I'm so glad I didn't have to do visual effects," or that they didn't have to do CGI. They'll say that, or they'll be so proud of that the movie was totally practical effects. But the thing about it is that just like you can have bad CGI or bad practical effects, or you have effects that are great at the time that don't age well, the same thing happens to practical effects. So as a practical effect, Chet's, piece of crap, was at the time, it was fine, but not like now when you watch it, it's like, it could have used some work, right? Because the mouth didn't exactly line up with what he was saying. His limbs weren't all of that fluid. So it's like, you could, now looking at it today, looking at like effects that were made like 30 years ago, you can say, that doesn't look as good as maybe it could have. But then again, this is a comedy, and that's not what you're here watching the movie for, right?
That's what I was going to say. Like, everything you said is true, but it doesn't matter.
Right.
It's still funny, right?
It's
still funny today.
Right.
And it almost makes it, that much more charming. Because it's not the latest and greatest in terms of effects.
Right. I just want directors to get comfortable with using CGI and not thinking that it's like that they're making a pact with the devil whenever they choose to do so.
No, you got to do it. On my film, I did a lot of the visual effects myself, which most of the time I enjoy. It can be pretty frustrating, and it can be very tedious, to execute a visual effect. Even just simple stuff like, replacing a screen, it can be really hard to do. And I felt, I lacked confidence, right, in some of these things. Is it going to be good enough? I don't think it distracts, from the movie, but in the end, I would, try to convince myself. I would be like, well, it's a comedy; it'll be fine.
Yeah, and actually,
that's what you're here for, right? Like, you're not here,
right.
To see a bunch of amazing, Marvel visual effects. Although, hey, Marvel, like, not everything needs to be a visual effect. But,
right. I definitely think that I was just saying, I definitely think that there are some times when visual effects are overused. And so there is that.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. So, I'm sorry, was there something I was interrupting you?
I don't think so. I think I was just, making the point that when it comes to comedy, the effects are not the most important thing. As long as you've got a good story and good characters, and great dialogue, like, the audience will forgive an awful lot and go on the ride with you.
Yeah, I think I heard that Back to the Future, that film actually has unfinished visual effects in it. So yeah, I think you're exactly right on that point.
I wouldn't know where.
Right. No, actually, was it Back to the Future or was this other one that I watched? It may have been a different movie. I know that I'm probably conflating the two movies that I saw, because one of the movies, no, it was Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters has unfinished special effects. Like, if you look carefully, you can see wires on one of the ones on something. I don't know, because I never noticed it. Right, I never noticed any wires. But according to Ivan Reitman, that there are unfinished effects in Ghostbusters. And in Back to the Future, they showed the movie to an audience, like as a, what do you call it? As a screening, to get audience reaction. And when they did the screening, there were some unfinished effects, but the audience didn't care, right? Because that movie is so funny.
A good story, great laughs will get you an awful long way. For sure.
Right, absolutely. So, and then as an audience member, you're thinking, well, this must be part of the movie. This is probably why the movie is funny, because you have this thing that doesn't look quite right. And I'm laughing at that as well, when in reality, it's an unfinished effect. So that's it for our favorite parts. Let's move on to the top 10 trivia. Let me find the correct button. Oh, there it is. Let's go on it. We're going to talk about some of the behind the scenes shenanigans of Weird Science. Yeah. Ron, why don't you start us off?
Okay. This one kind of chaps my hide, but John Hughes wrote the script for Weird Science in 2 days.
Yeah,
like,
that's
how do you do that, man?
Yeah. I bet the guy that's writing the Game of Thrones books, I think he's probably wondering the same thing. And
yes, interesting. So I read, or at least listened to a book called A Long Time Ago in a Cutting Room Far, Far Away, and it's a biography by a film editor. His name is Paul Hirsch, and he edited a couple of the Star Wars films. He edited Carrie, but he did a couple of John Hughes films. I think Planes, Trains, and Automobiles was one of the films that he cut. But he had a big complaint about John Hughes, which was he didn't have much of an attention span. So by the time they were to editing on the film, he'd already moved on, which I think we kind of talked about before. Like, he lost interest in the movie he was working on and just went on to the next one. So I think he loved to write, but he also did very little rewriting. So he would write the script, and like that would be the shooting script, which, for me, like, I rewrote my script for Chupacabra 20 times. But apparently it just flows out of him, and what he writes on the first draft is what gets used in the movie, which is just crazy to me.
Yeah, that's good. I'm glad that that he was that talented, and I think that when I say your name, sometimes I'm saying Rob, sometimes I'm saying Ron. I apologize for that, Rob.
That's fine, because my pseudonym is actually Ron Martin.
Oh, okay, so that works out.
When I work on other projects, other people, like where I'm not the director, not in control, I will use the non-plume Ron Martin. So that's
I guess
so. Ron's fine, but
I'll put Ron Martin in the search engine and see what I come up with.
I think you will find a couple of things. So.
Right. So up next, John Hughes wasn't happy during filming of this movie because it interfered with another project that we had talked about earlier that he cared about much more, and resulted in his working a punishing schedule for months. But he agreed to direct it because Universal gave him the deal where he could also direct a more valued project if he started this first one, the other film, The Breakfast Club from 1985. So yeah, he was actually working on 2 movies at the same time. And it was kind of like what they did with the Wachowski siblings, where they had to direct, I forgot what it was, but it was a film that they had to put out before they could do The Matrix. So I guess there are a lot of studios.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I'm
interested to know what film that.
I like Girl Interrupted keeps popping to mind, but it's not Girl Interrupted. It's a different film. Let me look up their filmography real quick and see if I can find it, because I think it was with Jennifer Tilly. Um, but I can't remember exactly. I know it had two girls, and it was supposed to be really racy or something. It was supposed to be like what's the word I'm looking for?
Is it with Gina Gershon and Meg Tilly?
No, I don't even know.
All right.
Bound. That was it.
Bound. Yeah. That's it.
It sounds like a bondage movie.
There might have been some of that in there. Yeah, I think that was kind of a comedy thriller.
Right.
If I remember correctly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the movie. They had to make that before they proved themselves and that they can handle the Matrix. I should go and watch that. I never seen that before.
Yeah, I mean that was the reputation for John Hughes. Like he was just constantly sort of losing interest in the project that he was on, always wanting to go on to the next big thing. But if you think about that period of time where he did, he wrote Vacation, and then you've got 16 Candles, and then Weird Science, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. There's another film in there, but then after that, Pretty in Pink, just like he was essentially defining what it means to be a teenager, in the movies that he released just over a couple of years. Like, it's wild.
Yeah, absolutely.
Super talented.
So we were speaking earlier about you had alluded to universes, how some filmmakers had build their universes. One guy that builds his universes is somebody like who I forgot the name. Who directed Pulp Fiction again? Tarantino. Thank you.
Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah. So Tarantino kind of builds a universe. Like you can almost imagine all of his movies take place in the same universe because he'll throw in like an Easter egg, like the Big Kahuna Burger or something like that. So John Hughes kind of does the same thing. So why don't you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so interesting that Weird Science partially set at Shermer High School, which is also the name of the high school in The Breakfast Club. I believe they shot at the same high school for both those films in Illinois. And I'm pretty sure that Ferris Bueller also attended Shermer High School. So yeah, he creates this world. I think that he's very familiar with, being from the Midwest and the Chicago area. So I think it's something that really he was writing from his own life and very comfortable with, and then also was very comfortable out of the Hollywood scene, and being there in Illinois and shooting outside the Hollywood system. So that was definitely his preference, and I think part of why that he took that approach.
Yeah, it's his very own Castle Rock situation.
Yes. Which for me, I told you, like, I want to do another movie set in the same place, Bluffkin, Texas. Like, that's my Shermer High School. Just like Derry is Stephen King's go-to town for his film. So I can totally relate.
Right. So the same moving shot of the exterior of the high school was used for the beginning of 16 Candles from 1984, as well as the end of this movie. The same people can be seen making the same movements in both movies. I don't think anybody will really notice unless you're a huge fan of both these films and watch them over and over again.
I definitely didn't pick that up, although it has, that same vibe, Shermer High School, shot the same way, but I didn't realize that it actually might have been the same shots. That's interesting. Yeah, so Anthony Michael Hall actually passed on the second film, National Lampoon's European Vacation, that was shot the same year, to be in Weird Science. And because of that, right, they had to go on. So your Rusty Griswold, Audrey Griswold, played by two completely different actors in European Vacation, and it was something that they continued to do. So in every vacation movie, the kids are always played by different actors. And I think in European Vacation, Juliette Lewis actually played Audrey in that movie. She definitely did in one, and I'm pretty sure it was European Vacation, which she was probably the best thing about European Vacation.
Right. I think my favorite thing in European Vacation is when the Griswolds get stuck in a traffic circle. So that's funny.
That's funny. It had its moments. I don't want to trash it too much. There's a funny scene where Chevy Chase as Clark Griswold dances in lederhosen. That was pretty good stuff, where they start smacking each other as part of the dance. I'm a huge Vacation, fan, the whole series. And I said before, like, Christmas Vacation is a go-to for the entire family. But Vacation itself, the first one, like, I have been on that trip. Like, my parents, we used to drive in the car, because we couldn't afford to fly in the plane. So we, pack up into the car and drive to Chicago, surprisingly enough, because that's where my parents, or my dad's family was. But yeah, we drive from Maryland to Chicago. And I remember one time, like, my dad was a funny guy, entertaining. And like, we were at this, shitty motel, and he went in to pay, and then all of a sudden he comes out and he's just running at a full sprint towards us. And I'm like, what is going on? And he says, I got into an argument with the hotel manager. I punched him out. We got to go. And I was freaking out. Like, we're piling in the car. And then he was just like, no, I'm just kidding. But those sorts of shenanigans, definitely I can relate, from the Vacation.
Yeah, absolutely. And from Maryland to Chicago, that's a pretty good trip. When I was growing up, we used to make, and I still make these trips, but we used to make annual trips to, like, North Carolina, and a 4 hour, well, actually, probably, it depends on who's driving. It could be 4 hours. It could be 6 hours, depending on who you ride with. But I remember those long car trips, and me thinking that it only costs $1 to make that trip, because on I-95 there used to be toll roads, and I remember my grandma, she would toss a quarter into the toll booth, and it would let us through. So I'm thinking, well, if she only there's 4 tolls, so it's like $1 to get through the toll booth. And I'm thinking, like, I'm not thinking about gas or food or anything like that. I'm thinking, well, I guess all you need is $1 to drive all the way from Maryland to North Carolina. That's the price.
What a bargain.
Right. So up next, we have in an interview with Howard Stern, Robert Downey Jr. cleared up the rumors that he defecated in Kelly LeBrock's trailer. He stated that his co-star Robert Bruiser, who played Max, joked about defecating in people's trailers throughout the shoot. They eventually did it in one female cast member's trailer, but it was not LeBrock's. John Hughes questioned everyone in the cast as to who did it. And when he got down to Downey replied, "No, but I sure wish it was me who did it." He also stated that there was never any tension between him and Hughes, and he really highly respected their friendship. So yeah, that's actually funny. And he said that, "No, but I sure wish it was me who did it." So I wonder why he wished that he had done it. Like, was it something about this female cast member that they didn't like? I didn't get too deep into why this incident occurred, but or if there was something like something about the actor that they didn't like, that they had to take a stinker in the actor's trailer. So I don't know. Yeah.
So do you think that this means, like, oh, I just went into their trailer and used their bathroom and took a nasty dump? Or do we think that, they like drop one in the middle of the carpet?
No, they definitely dropped one in the middle of the floor because there's
no.
right, because there's no way anybody would get upset with messing up a toilet. It's a trailer. Trailers have toilets. I don't think anybody would say anything. I think that they would just call a plumber and fix the toilet or something like that. I think this is because they joked about taking a dump in somebody's trailer. So to me, in my mind, that means they went into the middle of the whatever passes for the living room in the trailer and they popped the squats, right?
Well, I mean, Robert Downey Jr. would go on to do things even worse than that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But he was high. He was high when he did those things.
Kids, what are you going to do?
Right. So what's the next one?
So in the John Hughes documentary, Don't You Forget About Me, Kelly LeBrock described her character Lisa as Mary Poppins with breasts.
Now,
which I go ahead.
No, I was just saying I take umbrage with that because it's not like she's gigantic breasted, right? I think that her breasts are about the same size as Mary Poppins. So I don't know if what she's saying is correct. Yeah,
that's true.
Like that was the standard back then in 1985. That is what the sexiest female bodies would look exactly like hers.
Yes. I think the point they were trying to drive home is that she was this sort of mentor, character to these two teenage boys, and also happened to be very sexy. But that was one of the things that struck me about the movie. Was just how, wise and sage she was, and, how very quickly in the film, right, she becomes, really just a mentor to them and helps them to, make the right decisions. So it is interesting. Like we definitely kind of focus on her sensuality, because she's a gorgeous woman. But the character, definitely had more going on upstairs, and obviously, like the boys created her, to be intelligent, right? I think, when they're doing it, they actually have to decide how smart she's going to be. In fact, they don't have enough compute power to make her as intelligent as they want her to be, and so they tap into like NASA's, computer system to be able to get that compute power. So that they can make, both a beautiful and smart woman.
Yeah, that I want to make a correction. They didn't tap into NASA systems. They straight up hacked it. They hacked the system.
Fair enough. Yes.
And basically stole.
They were like the OG hackers,
right?
Man.
Right. Stole the computing powers. The OG in AI development, because that is what we would call it now. What we would say is that they were developing AI. We would say that they were feeding it data in order for the AI to teach itself. It was like a machine learning model that they had built, and then they started feeding data to it so that it could learn and teach itself how to be intelligent. And their system was so incredibly advanced that they didn't actually have to like feed text about Albert Einstein to their computer model. They could just feed it a picture of Albert Einstein, and the computer program would inherently know that this person was smart, and it would know everything that Einstein knew. So yeah, very advanced computer modeling that they had going on in 1985.
they were pioneers of AI.
This is back when basically computers were magic, right? They could pretty much do anything, and that's how we thought of them. So it absolutely worked. But I was enamored by that sort of thing. But the other thing is that they it's how it kind of got me thinking about the conversation that we're all having about AI right now.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny. I think, even then we understood the sort of, limitless potential that computers had. So
right. Cool. So up next, there are 5 actors named in the credits as the Weenies. There were multiple scenes shot with these characters who were buds of Gary and Wyatt. John Hughes did not have final cut of the film, so almost all of the weenie scenes were cut. They can be seen in the mall where Ian and Max chase after Lisa. Lisa passes by the weenies and Max and Ian slap them. That was interesting because it's not that I thought they were important, but they did actually stand out. And the thing that also stood out about me is that the one on the end, the shortest one, was a girl, or it seemed like it was a girl that was dressed up as a boy, like the rest of them. And it seemed like they had a thing going on, like some kind of a commonality about them. But I didn't recognize them as something that might have been cut from the film. So also,
yeah, that's interesting. I guess they didn't really register for me, but I'm not surprised. And in 16 Candles, there's these two buddies that are part of the friend group, which I think are probably played a very similar role to what the Weenies played in Weird Science. So I suspect that John Hughes as a kid probably had his little friend group, and they were a bunch of dorks who
right
just, couldn't get the girl.
Right. Or they can also be seen sitting on a couch with Lisa when the house is going berserk during the party scene. The edited TV version of the film includes a scene where the weenies arrive at the party on mopeds wearing Devo helmets. Lisa opens the door and allows them into the party. So I think that had we had more of these scenes with the weenies, it probably would have provided more context into the characters of Gary and Wyatt. But I don't know. I think the movie turned out all right.
Yeah, really good. Yeah, sorry, I was just thinking about the that scene at the end, and when the Road Warriors all show up and threaten the party, and then Gary pulls out a gun. That's how they vanquish the bad guys, which is another choice that maybe you don't make these days, but.
Well, here's the thing. He pulls out a gun thinking that it's a squirt gun because Lisa had pulled out a gun on his parents. That's how they ultimately got out of the house. Like, yes. Gary's father's threatening.
She squirts him in the face in the car, and he's like, "Oh, it's a squirt gun."
Right. I mean, she made them forget anyway, but before she did that, she pulled out a gun, threatened his parents, and then basically kidnapped Gary out of his house. Then told him that everything's going to be all right. It's a squirt gun. So now Gary has the same gun at the end of the movie. And you've got these road warriors created by Lisa, right? Because she's trying to teach them how to man up, basically. She's trying to...
Mary Poppins my ass.
Right. She's trying to give them some cojones. So she has these road warriors break into the house. They terrorize everybody. They destroy the house, basically. And then you had Wyatt. He somehow ends up with this gun. And here's the funny part. So you being a soldier, I guess you would recognize this, that there's a time when he's kind of like flashing everybody. Like he's kind of like very... careless about where he's pointing the barrel.
Oh, he's
gun.
Waving the gun
waving
all
it
over
around,
the place,
right?
and people
right.
are ducking.
And people are ducking, right, trying not to get shot and whatnot. And then Wyatt is like, "Hey, you got to be careful. You have a gun." And he's like, "Don't worry, man. It's a squirt gun." And he pulls the trigger and he fires an actual gun. So it's like actual bullet. So he realizes that somehow his squirt gun had transmutated into an actual live firearm. And thankfully, it wasn't pointing at anybody at that time. So yeah, fantastic, very fantastic. So I guess you can get the next part.
Yeah, sure. A year before the film's 10th anniversary, the hit movie was made into a television series, Weird Science, in 1994, which surprisingly ran for 5 seasons. You had Vanessa Angel played Lisa, Michael Manasari played Wyatt Donnelly, John Asher played Gary Wallace, and Lee Tergesen played Chet Donnelly. And I kind of remember this show. I'm a little surprised that it made it through 5 seasons because it was just kind of okay, and it wasn't the original cast, and so Anyway, I don't know that it really hit the zeitgeist or anything, but it had a surprising run on TV.
Yeah, I was like, when I was doing the research, and my entire research was on IMDb. So, so I was going through it and I saw this and like, was there a TV show called Weird Science? And then I realized that like maybe like I have a sliver of a memory of there being a Weird Science TV show. And I went on YouTube and I watched what do you call it? The trailer for it. It's not really a trailer. It's more like, like when TV stations will put a promo for a show. So that's what I saw. I saw a promo for the first episode of Weird Science. And I was like, oh my God, this was actually a thing. And then the other surprise, like you, I'm surprised it lasted for 5 seasons. So we might look at it and it's like, man, it don't seem like that was a thing, but 5 seasons is a long time. So it had to have resonated with somebody. So somebody had to have been watching it with the last 5 seasons. So yeah, that is surprising. I think it was on the USA Network.
Yeah.
That's right. So finally, we have Michael Anthony Hall and Robert Downey Jr. would later work together in the 1985 through 1986 season of Saturday Night Live. They didn't actually last the entire season, but it's notable because this is already after they've sort of made it in movies. Usually it goes from Saturday Night Live to movies, but they went from the movies to Saturday Night Live and they basically stayed there for half a season. So that was a very unusual move on their part.
Yeah, I'm curious as to, what sort of sparked that decision. Now, I mean, Robert Downey Jr. is still pretty early in his career. And Anthony Michael Hall, definitely was out there because of all of the John Hughes films that he had been in. But he didn't do anything or didn't do much with John Hughes after. And I'm curious as to kind of what had them making a decision to join the cast of SNL, which they did it at a terrible time. Like you said, the show wasn't great then, and they didn't last very long on it. But I do sort of recall some of the bits that they did, but it's a pretty vague memory for me.
The only thing that I would suggest is that maybe they wanted to challenge themselves because I feel like maybe they were afraid they were going to go stale as actors, and something like improv could really, keep the creative juices flowing. I know, like for example, Patrick Stewart, when he was doing Star Trek, he would always do these one-man plays, to keep himself like one toe in the theater. He always wanted to, because that's where his roots are. So that's where he wanted to be firmly planted, where he would like know how to act in a theater situation in case he needed to go back to the theater, I guess. Or maybe
could be. And SNL had been on for a while at that point. They definitely could have just been fans of the show.
Yeah, that too. Maybe that was it.
Experience, but I'm sure we could figure it out.
Yeah. So that's it for the trivia. I hope that you found this information insightful. I sure did when I was doing the research for it. So up next, we're going to find out what the critics thought. So on Rotten Tomatoes, the critics have it at a 60%. The audience score is 69%. So, same. On IMDb reviews, it has it at a 6.6 out of 10. So it's kind of like the same across the board. It's like people are basically feeling the same way about this movie. So we have Wendy Ide from The Times UK. She wrote, "It's a silly sci-fi sex comedy, but there are amusing moments to warrant revisiting." Yeah, you know what? I think she's correct. I think that
Wendy is on target.
Yeah, I think that's correct. I think there's allusions to maybe Wyatt having sex with Lisa, because how else would he end up with her underwear on? Maybe, but they don't actually show that much sexually explicit. I think it's when we're referring to a sex comedy, we're really talking about teenagers who desperately want to have sex. Up next,
yes,
is Janet Maslin from the New York Times. She wrote, "Even 14-year-old boys may find it heavy sledding." And heavy sledding, I had to look that up. That means that it's basically hard to get through, or it's hard to like
Yeah.
understand or whatever. And I negative. I don't think she really understands teenage boys at all.
Yeah, I'd be interested to get a current 14-year-old boy's viewpoint on the movie, but I think that there's enough there that they'd get a kick out of it.
Yeah, I think so also.
Well, Allison Rose from Flick Direct says, if you were captivated by the originality and humor of Weird Science in theaters, you'll delight in revisiting this John Hughes classic that transcends generations. And yeah, I think that captures it for me. It's not a movie that I had, given much thought about over the years. Unlike like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, which I've rewatched many times, The Breakfast Club, kind of same sort of hallowed ground. For me, this was one that I haven't watched it probably since I watched it the first time, and I was kind of surprised at how well it held up.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I'm the same. Like, it's always at the back of my mind, and I think the thing that where it sits is right where the theme song sits at, and it's not. When people talk about John Hughes, they don't talk about Weird Science. They don't really talk about this movie. They kind of skip over this one. But yep. I'm glad this was one of your choices, and I chose this because it's like I felt like it was about time I did a rewatch of this movie, and I'm glad I did.
Yeah, I appreciated the opportunity as well. Like I was like, you know what? This was a funny movie.
Yeah.
So Simon Murado of Quick Flicks says, watching Weird Science again in the harsh light of my 20s was like catching up with an old friend who I had recalled as a raucous party animal, but was now clearly a shaky meth addict with no teeth. Geez, Simon.
Yeah, that's...
You don't have to be a dick about it. Come on.
It's a bit much, but I can see where Simon is coming from. It's like he's not entirely wrong, right? I can see how, and the reason I say that is because I can see how somebody would feel that way. It's like I can't find fault with that statement.
The harsh light of his 20s, though. Come on, dude.
I don't know. I feel like I get what he's saying, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to be too hard on Simon. It's like there are some critics, like I said, that they'll say something just to be contrary, but I think I can see where Simon is sitting at. So I'm not going to be too harsh on his criticism.
I'm with him on a few things that we talked about, the scene in the Blues Club, not really holding up. So yeah, there are a few things that maybe are a little cringy, but I just feel like Simon's being a bit harsh.
Right. So at last, Weird Science is, as of this recording, available on streaming. That's it for today. Next week, what you gonna do? You gotta catch up with me as I reminisce and get all nostalgic about Bad Boys. Bad Boys. What you gonna do?
What you gonna do when they come for you?
Absolutely. And not a thing. I'm just going to get caught. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get
Yeah.
if the bad boys are after me, I'm caught. That's it. I'm not even going to try to run. So you can follow us on Twitter, TikTok, Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and YouTube at Backlick Cinema. Don't forget that you can contact us with any questions, comments, or suggestions at fanmail@backlickcinema.com. Please leave a 5-star review on Apple, 1-star on Spotify. You know what to do. Rob, do you have any additional plugs besides the one that you mentioned earlier?
You can visit that website that probably needs some updating at chupacabramovie.com. On social, we're at the Chupacabra Movie. You can get our movie on Blu-ray and DVD at fine online retailers like Amazon and Walmart. And I'd encourage everybody to keep an eye out for it. It'll be on streaming soon. Always helps when you rate or review the film on IMDb, Letterboxd, and the retail sites. Feed the algorithm, and let's get some people seeing this movie.
Absolutely. One last time, if you like the show, then please help us grow by spreading the word about Backlit Cinema, the podcast. Believe me, it matters. And I know you've enjoyed our guest, Rob Mabry, so please be on the lookout for The Legend of El Chupacabra. I've been Zoe Richardson. Be safe, share a movie from yesteryear with your family, hug your loved ones, and if you're going to be anything, be outstanding.